Lawrence O'Donnell came up with some really interesting news. The fact is that Donald Trump, instead of just one indictment coming out of the Georgia case of election tampering that's going on against him, he may have multiple indictments coming out of there. Apparently, the jurors have been talking to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which is well within their rights. And there's some new information coming out. Here's Lawrence.
Communications.
All I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have.
That was, of course, Donald Trump's call to Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, who testified about that call to the grand jury. The grand jurors told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution about another recorded telephone call. They, quote, heard a recording of a phone call Trump placed to late Georgia House Speaker David Ralston, in which the president asked the fellow Republican to convene a special session of the legislature to overturn Democrat Joe Biden's narrow victory in Georgia. One juror said Ralston proved to be an amazing politician. The speaker basically cut the president off. He said, I will do everything in my power that I think is appropriate. He just basically took the wind out of the sails. The juror said, well, thank you, is all the president could say. David Ralston did not call a special session of the legislature to overturn the election. David Ralston died in November of last year. But thanks to his recording of Donald Trump's phone call, the most important evidence that David Ralston could provide to that grand jury of Donald Trump's criminal interference in the election lives after him. Think about that. For 2 years and almost 3 months now, we have all known that Donald Trump made a phone call to Georgia Secretary of State asking to find 11,000 votes, and that was patently illegal on its face. But only Donald Trump knew that he also made a similarly criminal phone call to Georgia's Speaker of the House of Representatives, David Ralston. And then, in November of last year, David Ralston died. And Donald Trump might have gotten a few more minutes of sleep that night thinking, that's one witness who can never testify against him.
Ooh, well, that's interesting. How many of you have the following question? Did David Ralston die of natural causes? Just wondering. Or did they find him at the bottom of a set of spiral stairs like they did the wife? Go on, Lawrence.
But David Ralston had the presence of mind to tape Donald Trump's phone call to him. And so now David Ralston is, in effect, testifying against Donald Trump from the grave. The audio recording made by David Ralston could, in and of itself, represent an individual count in a larger indictment of Donald Trump. If Donald Trump committed a crime in his phone call to David Ralston, it is a different crime than the one he may have committed in his phone call to Secretary of State Raffensperger.
I just love how Lawrence is just really explaining this very slowly so that I can get it.
If each of those phone calls are criminal, then they each represent two separate crimes in what would be a multi-count indictment against Donald Trump recommended by the special grand jury, which could include other counts. And if true, that would truly be, in the words of the jurors, massive. The grand jurors were emotional in their interview about the harm that Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani and the rest of Donald Trump's liars inflicted on people by the lies they told about the election. Harm to individuals and to all of the American people. Among the most compelling witnesses, various jurors said, were Fulton County poll workers Ruby Freeman and her daughter, Shay Moss, who had received death threats after being singled out by Trump and his then attorney, Rudy Giuliani. Another mentioned Eric Coomer, the one-time executive for Dominion Voting Systems, who left his job after being vilified. Also mentioned was Tricia Raffensperger, the wife of Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, who broke down when describing the vitriol and threats leveled at her. One juror said, "I was pretty emotional throughout the whole thing." A juror said, "I wouldn't cry in front of any of the witnesses, but when I would get in my car, I was like, I just left that and I have to go do my job now? I just know things that are hard to know." A grand juror crying in the car after hearing what Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani did to Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss.
I think we can all identify with the grand juror crying in the car after hearing what Donald Trump has done. I was crying after hearing of the child separation policy. People were crying about the effect on the widespread gun violence we're seeing after he decided to freeze the rule that took away guns from the severely mentally ill, or wipe 500,000 people off the you know the background check list. We can understand. And that explains why people are excited to see this man brought to justice. Now, I don't know if it's going to be the Stormy Daniels case that is the first indictment, and the Georgia case that is the first, second, third, fifth indictment. I don't know. But I think we need to do this as a country. We absolutely need to bring him to justice, because there are other people like like Trump himself, like Ron DeSantis, like any number of these little fascists who want to run for office. They need to know that they are still going to be held accountable under the law. Now, don't get me started. Had we held George Bush accountable for his war crimes and what he did, and, I'm sure there were other people who could have been held accountable before him. But how long are we going to go as a country before we hold these people accountable? And let that serve as a warning that there is still a rule of law supported by the majority of people in the United States, and that no one should be above it. I'm Julianna Forlano. You're listening to the Political Voices Network.
Minocqua Brewing Company is excited to partner with Equality Vines to create Choice Wine. Choice Wine comes in two choices, Rosé and Sauvignon Blanc. This wine was created to support women's reproductive rights after the Supreme Court rolled back Roe v. Wade in 2022 and caused chaos all over the country. For all you viewers on the Political Voices Network, go to choice.equalityvines.com and type in the promo code PVN to get 10% off on Choice Sauvignon Blanc and Choice Rosé.